This is a quick video on using the database Scopus and on finding a literature review that you can use as a way of starting your research. We're also going to look at a couple of quick features of Scopus. This video will remain short. I know a lot of you have had some experience with databases, and I'm not going to get into all of the details in this video, but I do want to quickly guide people on how to get to Scopus and to point out some of the useful features about it. So we are at the University of Utah's homepage. I want to go to the Marriott Library, and I can get there through academics and then scrolling down to libraries. And there are numerous other ways of getting to the Marriott Library's homepage. This is just the one that I am choosing. Once we are on the University of Utah homepage, I want to click on databases. Clicking on that will bring up an alphabetized list. There are a lot of good databases within this list. I'm going to end this video by pointing out a number of them, but the one I want to go to right now starts with S. If I click on S, I'm going to scroll down till I see Scopus. I like Scopus. It has a really comprehensive sort of catalog of articles, and it also has some tools that some of the other databases do not have. I have also heard from several people that are working in the medical industry that it is one of the most prominent ones for people that are in med school. So for all those reasons, I tend to focus on Scopus as a first database that I'll go to, but it is certainly not the only one. There's a lot of other good ones too, and again, I will list them at the end of this video. Now, if I click on Scopus, it's going to bring up the interface. Now, if I'm on a home computer at this point, I need to log in with my credentials, with my university password. If you are on campus, it should just go straight to this. It is also worth noting that in order to use this database, you do need to log onto it through the University of Utah. You can't just Google Scopus and go to it. You've got to go through the U in order to have access to it. So databases work with a system of Boolean operators. A lot of you, no doubt, have heard of these and are familiar with them. The words and, or, and not are used to connect certain keywords and to limit the range of the search. So if I just type in, for instance, artificial intelligence, I'll hit enter on that, or I can click the research, and let's just see how many I got. 331,000 articles. Clearly too many to read through. So I'm going to back up and I'm going to try a slightly different search: artificial intelligence and medical diagnosis. And let's see how many I get on that. So if I click on search, now instead of 300,000, I am down to 5,000. And there are various other ways I could try to play around with my search to get it more narrow. I also want to quickly point out the wildcard feature. This is something that I have had a lot of students that do not know about. If I say artificial intelligence and medicine, and then right here, I'm going to put in an asterisk. That will search for the term medicine and medical both. So it is going to like broaden out the search more than it would otherwise. If I search for that, I should get considerably more than 5,000. Here I'm getting 18,000 documents. Now, I don't know if there's a right number that you're searching for here, but I will say if it's, you know, over 10,000, you're probably wanting to limit it a little bit more than what you have. And there are other ways of doing that besides just the keywords. There is this button right here, and I want to quickly examine a couple of options on that. It is worth noting that you can put in a certain date range. Let's say we're going to go back to, I don't know, maybe 2011 to present. Then we are going to adjust the document type. So rather than all, I want to start my research project by clicking on review. Now eventually you are obviously going to want to find articles for this research project, but I often encourage students to start by finding a literature review on the topic for a couple of reasons. One is that it allows them to sort of update that literature review. They can find something that's a few years old and they can think, okay, now my goal is to update that with the newest research, you know, to report kind of the information that that review had, but also to give it an update. It also allows you to find a potential goldmine of other articles. If you can find one good literature review, it is a nice way of mapping out what things have been published since that review was initially published. So I'm going to click on review, and I'm going to search with those limitations in place, and let's see what I get. All right, 738 documents. To my mind, that is a small enough number that you should be sort of scrolling through and seeing what you have. But let's talk about how these are organized. These are going to be sorted with the newest ones first. And as you scroll down the list, you can see under this little cited by button, most of these are going to say 0 or 1. There's one that's got a 4. That's slightly unusual for articles that are that new. What I would encourage you to do is to change this to cited by highest. This is a sort feature that allows you to find out what articles have made the greatest impact and thus to sort of guide you towards more potentially useful articles. Now, I'm not necessarily saying the first one that pops up under cited by is the best one. There might be some that are not necessarily relevant or that might not be the best review for you, but you should be trying to find stuff that has been cited. If it's going to be included in a literature review, the goal is to have it be something that has made some sort of impact. So, let me scroll down the list, just sort of reading titles and seeing what might be the most potentially useful one. This one right here seems really interesting to me. So, applications of deep learning in biomedicine. It has been out only for a couple of years and it has already garnered 154 citations. That is a good sign. That means that article obviously had an impact, and that might be a worthwhile one to look into. If I do want to look into it, next step would be to read the abstract of it. The abstract will, as we know, talk about what the article actually says, and it can give you an idea of whether it is useful or not. Let's say that I do decide that this particular review is useful for me. So I can click on this little find it button, and generally this works well. There are occasionally some hiccups, but most of the time this will take you to the article. Sometimes you have to jump through a hoop or two in order to get there. Looks like the first hoop is coming up right here. It says full text available. Let's try to get it. And so this is the article that we were searching for, and I can click on American Chemical Society journals, and that will bring up the actual article. I can read it in either HTML format or I can download a PDF. If we click on the PDF, there is the article, and I can read through it and decide whether or not it's useful. Now, before I do that, if I click on the title, then I have a couple of options that are potentially useful for me. One is that I can scroll down and see the bibliography of this article, and I've got links to all of these as well. And you can also, it's worth noting, see how many times these articles have been cited. Here's one called Deep Learning, published in 2015, cited 1,200 times already. That is an incredibly prominent article. It comes from Nature, one of the biggest players in the scientific publishing world, and that could potentially be a useful article for me. So I could click on Find It, and that will come up in another tab. Now, this is going to be a technique called searching backward, meaning I have my review that I found that I'm interested in, applications of deep learning in biomedicine, and I can go through and see what this article has cited as part of its bibliography. That's called searching backward, and it's a useful technique. It is also worth noting that you can do something called searching forward. Let me just back up and look at that article in the initial search box. So here's our article, Applications of Deep Learning in Biomedicine. And over here, I've got this little column cited by, and I can go down here to our article and see the 154 articles that have cited it since it initially came out. So these articles I'm going to click on, and then I can also arrange them in terms of whatever the most cited is. So newest is the default. That's how Scopus is going to put it when you first access these. But if I go to cited by highest, it's going to reorder them in such a way that it will bring up the articles that have garnered the most citations, and some of these might be really useful as well. And again, you don't necessarily need to go for the biggest possible citation count as the main factor in an article. There might be something that has like 20 citations that is fine, but if an article has been out for a couple of years course and it has 0 citations or 1 citation, that is usually a sign that it probably didn't make that much of an impact and it probably should not be included in a literature review. So as you are finding articles, I want you to be highly conscious of this column and what it can lead you to. Let's say this happens to be a useful article. I can read the abstract of it. I can figure out whether or not that is useful for me. And I can look at what articles have cited it since it came out. Now, to be clear, you should not just look for reviews for this project. I would say 1 or 2 literature reviews is appropriate. I have occasionally had students misunderstand this and think that the literature review should be written solely through other literature reviews. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying that it is useful to start with a literature review. It's a useful way of getting some of the initial content for the topic. One other thing to note, most of these databases will take care of the citations for you. For instance, if I go back to one of these articles and I say, okay, let's say this seems like a good one to me and I want to cite that, then I can click the little box here so it's selected, and then I go over, I've got to hit the dots and this create bibliography. You have to run through a step or 2 on this in order to get there, but it will create a bibliography for you, so you do not need to go through and do it. Here's Council of Biology editors. Unfortunately, they do not have IEEE on this. I will say that the IEEE databases do have that as an option for citation, but we could switch it to Council of Biology editors, or if you want to use APA, that's fine. That's acceptable in most hard science context. So either one of those, I can create a bibliography. Normally in class, if we're doing a face-to-face class, I'll spend a little bit more time on the databases, but not much. Usually I'll kind of guide students to them and I will say, okay, go play around with this, figure it out. If you have any questions about these, let me know. I am going to now list a series of databases that are good to use with, or that are good to use for this research project.